Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
All right, thanks for tuning in to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm Rich Walsh. I'll be joined by Chris Mueller in a matter of moments, and we're talking about the Steelers and Bengals here tonight. Happy Thanksgiving Eve, Chris. One of my favorite holidays. I think the older you get, the more you appreciate Thanksgiving. At least I do.
Oh, Richie, I couldn't agree more. It's been, I think, my favorite holiday. What's the age? Let's ask this question. We all still get excited when we get a nice present. For example, if your lovely wife had perhaps a Lab brand putter under the tree at Christmas, one of those bad boys that takes torque out of the equation, you'd be very excited. But at a certain point, we all get a little bit less excited permanently to get gifts and for the Christmas thing, I think, in general. And we want to be around our loved ones and eat good food and have nice conversation. Whatever age that happens, for me, it was probably around 18 or 19 or 20. That is when Thanksgiving takes over as the top dog on the holiday list. That's just my personal opinion. Now, if my wife were to perhaps leave a set of wedges under the Thanksgiving cornucopia, I certainly wouldn't complain about it, but it's definitely number one on my list.
You heard that, wedges and a putter. I think you're sending messages out for.
Richie, I want to make this very clear. Do not need the putter. Putter started to come alive late, and we are going to upgrade the wedges on our own. It's been a lot of years. Those grooves are worn. And because we weren't able to get that big match at Longview, you and Pomp, me and J-Mo, I'll have fresh wedges, and I'll be spinning that ball all over the place. I'll throw it right down there in the punch bowl on 13, Richie.
I can't wait to see that, Chris. You guys are probably going to have to give us strokes maybe. But anyways, that'll be fun to watch. I think I started to appreciate Thanksgiving more the older I got, like you, maybe in the mid-20s, where you transition to having a good meal. The problem with me, I don't know about you, but I've worked a lot of Thanksgiving, so I never really got to enjoy the Thanksgiving. Actually, we would celebrate Thanksgiving the day before, like today, but I'm going to be off tomorrow night, which I'm happy to be home. Celebrating Thanksgiving.
You've got a great thing. You're not working, you're going to be home, and you have the perfect, and I do mean perfect, nap game on the NFL trifecta tomorrow. Giants in Dallas, there are going to be family members of players on those teams who are actually sleeping through that game and not watching it. So it's a perfect setup, I think, for people who love Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving preemptively to everybody out there. It is really an awesome holiday, and I hope everybody has a very good one.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to everyone out there. Happy Thanksgiving Eve. Be safe tonight. Obviously, it's very dangerous out there on Thanksgiving Eve sometimes, so be careful. All right, what I do want to talk about is the Steelers. They have to be careful this game because they got to match points with, I think, maybe, arguably, the best offense out there right now. Their defense stinks, and that's been a main problem why they're 4-7.
Yeah, if the Bengals were 7-4, probably not even like 8-3, I think Joe Burrow would probably be the MVP frontrunner. I mean, he really has been that good this year. Mike Tomlin has a habit of making every team's offense sound like the 1994 Niners or the 80s Niners, and every defense is the 85 Bears or the 76 Steelers when he talks about them. But the actual superlatives he used when he talked about Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, for that matter, were very appropriate. You go into this game, Richie, and I have a couple of different thoughts, but one is very simple. You know what every good team, i.e. a team with a winning record, has done when they've seen the Bengals this year? You want to know what it is?
I want you to tell me.
They've beaten them.
Yeah.
They've beaten them. The Ravens have had to survive them, but they've beaten them twice. The Eagles absolutely drubbed them. The Commanders, very famously, it was the Jaden Daniels sort of coming out party. They didn't punt in that game. The Chargers had to hang on for dear life after bludgeoning, excuse me. They badgered them too. The Bengals for 30 minutes, then they had to hang on. But every winning record team that the Bengals have faced has beaten them. So if the Steelers fancy themselves a serious contender, we know they have a winning record, I would prefer it be with some offensive pyrotechnics just to show that they're in there. But they've got to beat this team. Like, the Bengals are in boxing, I don't know if you're a boxing guy, Richie, but the very famous tradition was if you had a heavyweight fighter or any really weight class fighter that you thought was a world championship contender, right before they got that title fight, they would fight a guy who was known as a gatekeeper, somebody good enough to give really tough fights to all the best fighters in the world, but rarely good enough to beat them. The Bengals sort of feel like that team right now. They are good enough to give every team in the NFL, up to and including the Lions, I think the league's best team, a very tough matchup. They just aren't good enough to win pretty much any of those. So that's what you're going up against on Sunday. You've got to beat them because every other good team they've faced has.
Are you saying that the Bengals are like Jake Paul? The Steelers have to go up
No,
against
he's not a
him?
gatekeeper. He would be. Did you play the old Mike Tyson's Punch Out for
Oh
Nintendo?
my God, he was
Richie?
unstoppable. You could never beat him. You had to get the
He was
code.
like
You had to get the code to beat him.
Jake Paul is like Glass Joe in that game. If he fought real boxers, it would be with a record of 1-99 with 99 KO losses. But no, I mean, I use that analogy, and it might be a little clunky if you don't like the inner workings of boxing, but I'm serious about it. The Bengals are that team that is going to test you in a lot of ways because their offense is so good. But the test is, can you expose their defense like every quality team has so far this year and stop their offense enough to win? And I think that's why it's a very interesting little litmus test game for the Steelers, particularly because it's on the road.
Yeah, definitely an interesting matchup. You got to see how good this offense is for the Steelers and how they match up with a very bad defense. We've seen these matchups so far this year that didn't work out for the Steelers. They had a good matchup against the Colts. They've had good matchups in other games that they've lost. They're good against winning teams. They're just bad against teams that don't have a winning record, and this game worries me. But we got to take a break. We'll talk more about this game coming up next. 412-575-2600 is the number. Back in a couple minutes. All right, welcome back to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm Rich Walsh, joined by Chris Mueller tonight. This is our GMC Tweet of the Night. You can see Peyton Wilson among the linebackers over the past 2 weeks. 91.2 PFF grade, which is second. He's really been impressive. I know when we talked about this rookie class, he's the one that always stood out to me because he was the guy that was drafted in the 4th round that should have been a 1st round, but because of his knees, he dropped. But I think this guy's a playmaker. I think he's going to be a star for the Steelers defense.
It's funny, if you expectations set properly for Peyton Wilson's career, like understanding that his body, I mean, I don't mean this to demean or disparage the guy at all, but his body might be a ticking time bomb with the knee problems in his past. If you get like 6, let's say 4 to 6 highly productive years out of him before his knees start to go, honestly, I would consider that a massive win for the Steelers. Now, short term right now, I think he's been just about as advertised, and I think the thing that he's done that is really encouraging is have that linear progression. I do think there were some bumps and some hiccups early in the season, but I think he, like a lot of guys on that team, is playing by and large his best ball lately. I still go back to obviously the play with Justice Hill, which is maybe the turning point play in that Ravens game, but they brought him in to be an athletic countermeasure to all the tight ends, the really athletic running backs, the guys that are just kind of hybrid weapons in the NFL anymore. And while he might not necessarily get a ton of snaps given the opponent or depending on the opponent, I think one of the nicest things you can say about him, one of the most praiseworthy things about him is you don't really notice him a lot. I know there's that spectacular interception I just mentioned, but a lot of the time if he's doing his job well, Rich, that just means that the guy he's covering isn't even getting the ball thrown to him because he's not open. That's a nice change of pace for a team that I feel like has too often been gashed over the middle by quality offenses in recent years.
Is it a close call for you for Steelers Rookie of the Year right now? I mean, I know he's going to be, it would be him or Zach Frazier, right? Maybe you could throw Mason McCormick in there as a long shot?
I think unless Frazier were to get hurt again, it would be him. He's just been... there have been occasional hiccups in his game, too. I think it's tough in that position. You're being asked to do a lot. But, you know, so you're not going to have like a perfect physical performance when there's so much mental going into the position on a day-to-day basis. But he'd be my pick. I mean, you think about, Richie, a couple of years ago, they draft Kendrick Green, play him out of position at center, and how that just nuked everything that offense and that offensive line wanted to do. To get somebody in there who might at times get overpowered by bigger defensive tackles, but is so sound from a technique perspective, that he largely keeps them on schedule. I think that's very impressive. It was very needed. And I think the good thing about Frazier is with the athletic ability and everything else and the obvious want to, he should become one of those guys that's better and better and better. Like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that you say maybe a poor man's or even better than a poor man's Jason Kelsey type career, where the guy's a Pro Bowler, maybe a couple of All-Pros, and just all around has a very good, solid NFL career.
So we were talking a little bit about this before we went to break. One thing that worries me about the Steelers right now, their predictability. And their predictability against bad teams, you know, this is why these games are close. And I think that could potentially happen this game against a horrible Bengals defense that everyone else torches. But, you know, everyone seems to know what they're doing. What can they do? I asked Russell Wilson this question today. I mean, he kind of skirted around it a little bit, but they are very predictable right now.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm sure you know this stat. Steelers, the only team in the league with an undefeated record against winning opponents. Every time they every time they have gone up against, a winning opponent this year, they've won. There's not a single team in the NFL that can lay claim to that other than them. As far as their offense, Richie, I don't know if you saw this stat today. I put it out there. I think I might have retweeted it. But they have been very lacking in early down success. So they end up with 53% essentially of their possessions, their series of downs. So like every individual series, right? You know, you get a first down, new series. They go to third down 53% of the time. That is 30th in the NFL. Their early down yards per play is 31st in the NFL. And so I think we've all been a lot happier with the offense because since Russell Wilson took over, they have put on display like this quick strike ability that they haven't had in the past. But here's the problem. They've become the Earl Weaver offense of baseball. Do you know what Earl Weaver's strategy was with the Orioles? Do you remember that when he was the manager?
Yeah.
It was take a couple walks and wait for a guy to hit a 3-run homer, and that's how we're getting 3 runs. We're not pushing, 2 or 3 singles around a walk and getting a couple runs across. So you've got the Steelers, and they're not very efficient. They don't their plays aren't successful by the definition of the law. Like, they don't get 4+ yards on these plays, and then they just hit a big one. And so against such a bad defense, it would just be nice for me. I want to see points, but I want to see routinely successful plays from them because as much as they have scored more points and their offense has looked to the eye more dangerous, the numbers don't necessarily back that up in every facet, Rich.
Well, they're too predictable on first down. I mean, they run the majority of the time, and I think everyone in the stadium knows that, and they kind of got to get away from that, especially against a defense like this, because you're giving that defense an advantage that they normally don't have. Let's go out to Dave in Cecil Township. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for taking my call. I don't know if it's true or not. I saw a post on Facebook tonight that Hines Ward made it into the Hall of Fame. Can you back that up?
I do not think he's getting into the Hall of Fame.
Dave, if you saw it on Facebook,
he's a
it has to be true.
Yeah, he's a semifinalist.
Facebook has
I think.
Never been wrong.
He's a semifinalist. I don't think he gets in. I don't know. I honestly think, and I know we talked about this on our Steelers pregame show this past week. Jerry Dulack's one of the 49 people that get to vote, and we were talking about that with Bob and Charlie, that we think that potentially Ben Roethlisberger could be the next Steelers that get into the Hall of Fame.
Ben's obviously going to get in. Whether it's on the first ballot or not, I don't know. I kind of have a weird suspicion he might actually have to wait at least one time through.
I think he's the first ballot guy. I do.
Well, I'm talking about what will happen. I personally do not. I reserve the first ballot for me to guys that are like in the truest rarefied air at any position, and he does not quite check that box for me. Like Tom Brady, first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Mahomes, when he retires, first ballot Hall of Famer. A guy, Eli Manning, is barely a Hall of Famer if he is one at all. But like an interesting example for me is, like, would you say Aaron Rodgers is a first ballot Hall of Famer? I think most people would say better quarterback than Ben, half the Super Bowls. Like, there's enough of a bad late career tale and some playoff failings with Rodgers, you could almost squint and make the case he shouldn't be a first ballot guy. I think Hines should be in. I mean, I've litigated this endlessly. I think we've all talked about it endlessly. I think he ultimately should get in. I think he's a victim of a little bit of circumstance where he didn't play for pass-heavy teams, and people are still going to look at the numbers first. But my thing is an eye test with these guys, Richie. I don't know how you personally, like, what your own rubric is, but I say, am I watching a Hall of Famer or was I watching a Hall of Famer? And for the overwhelming majority of Hines Ward's career, the answer for me was actually yes there. And it wasn't a hesitant yes, it was a pretty emphatic yes. Ben might be the next guy to get in, but Hines should still get in, and I would like to see him get in sooner rather than later. And as for the first part of this call, public service announcement when it comes to Pittsburgh sports. If you see it on Facebook,
yeah.
It is not necessarily so or even likely so. Go follow at KD Pomp or go follow, what's your Twitter handle? At Richie
Walsh, yeah.
Go follow at Chris Mueller PGH. Go follow people who are reporting on this stuff. I swear to you, if Hines Ward had been elected to the Hall of Fame, again, doesn't even happen on a night like tonight.
No, it happens on the day before the Super Bowl.
Right. Yeah. You would know about it. What are we doing here, people? You saw it on Facebook and you thought it was happening? Come on, Dave. Come on, you're better than that.
I'm torn with the Hines Ward. You know, I mean, he has similar numbers, and I know when you talked about circumstance, he's up against a bunch of receivers here that might be a little bit better than him and put up the stats like an Isaac Bruce a couple years ago. Then you have to deal with, Andre Reed, right? I think those guys have the edge, even though Hines Ward's stats are similar. So I think that's his issue.
I would take Hines over Andre Reed.
So would I.
I would take him, and I would take him. I would say it's at worst like a push with most of his contemporaries. There are dudes who are in there who I think Hines Ward is at best a wash with, if not better than.
All right, we got to take a break. Back in a couple minutes.